What is happening in the United States economy is absolutely unprecedented. Those who predicted disaster, economists, experts, are sitting quietly as if they've swallowed their tongues. All their predictions, all their forecasts are falling apart. No one understands why or how Trump's economy works, but it does work. Here's one stunned professional. By the way, he's actually quite pro-Trump, but even so, he's shocked. Louis Navellier, he's a major investor and analyst, and he manages an investment fund.
How do you assess? Given the macro picture, how will you invest by 2026?
We are going to achieve 5% gross domestic product growth. It's currently between 3.5 and 3.8, but trade indicators will push it higher. The trade deficit is at a 5-year low and exports are the second highest ever, even with low oil prices. So this will lead to significant upward adjustments. Most growth was due to reshoring, but also from and data centers. If you look at data centers, their order backlog is up by a percentage quarter over quarter. We'll start the new year having achieved 5% gross domestic product growth.
Just yesterday, this was considered unattainable when Trump said he expects 5% gross domestic product growth in 2026. All the commentators and experts actually laughed at him, but then, as almost always happens with Trump, he turned out to be right. And the so-called experts quickly switched to a new topic. They forget to apologize for calling him an idiot, a fascist, senile, a liar, and now they just talk about something else, completely forgetting that they were saying all those same things just a minute ago, about the fact that their claims weren't confirmed at all and everything Trump said was completely proven true. It's hard to be a genius. Geniuses were rarely recognized in their own country, and in his time, Trump was actually lucky. He was truly believed in by the producers of America's material wealth, and they entrusted him with the reins of power over the future of their children.
Mr. Trump took office in a quarter when the economy was shrinking, and in the following 2 quarters, he ensured steady growth.
In other words, he took a sinking ship and turned it into a racing frigate. But what's interesting is that the economy is developing differently in blue states, which are Democratic and red Republican states.
Meanwhile, the White House Council of Economic Advisors has identified just how different economic life is between red and blue states. A new report for the past 12 months shows that overall inflation in conservative states is lower than in liberal ones.
Take a look, for example, at the price of gasoline in Democratic states. This is the average price. And then in Republican states. So, Democrats. California per gallon is $4.29 on average. New York is $3.06. Massachusetts is $2.97. New Jersey is $2.86. That's a very low price for a Democratic state. Now, the Republican side also took 4 big states. Florida is $2.80. Remember, there was $2.86. The biggest one is Florida. Texas is $2.60. Georgia is $2.75. Ohio is $2.70. Lowest prices: Iowa dollar, 2.41, Arkansas dollar, 2.41, Oklahoma, $2.29. All 3, of course, are Republican. I want you to understand that. The same companies at their gas stations sell gasoline for $2.29 per gallon. $2 goes to them, and the state takes 29 cents. Everything above $2 at the moment. California, for example, charges you $4.50, so that's $2 more. They add $2.50 in taxes per gallon to gas, while Oklahoma adds 29 cents. That's the whole difference, and it's not just with gasoline, it's like that with everything in Oklahoma. Officials also want a lot just to understand. California charges its residents a state income tax. Well, that's in addition to the federal one. So the sales tax on anything you buy here is 10, or maybe it's already 18. Gasoline, tobacco, alcohol, and marijuana are all taxed. The property tax is 1.2% of the property's value. That's quite a lot. Fees for dog registration licenses, for business, for infrastructure improvements, schools, and transportation. That's what comes to their mind. We want money, so they start coming up with new things to charge for. Let's say a family earned $200,000 in a year. A typical family of 4, 2 adults and 2 children. And right away you have to give our governor $80,000. For what? So he can steal it or lose it, my God. In the state of Texas, they steal $15,000 less per year. In the state of Florida, they also steal, but $25,000 less. By the way, in Tennessee, Wyoming, New Hampshire, and Alaska, it's the same as in Florida. And do you know what they have in common? Well, in the smaller ones, they take $25,000, and what they have in common is that they're red Republican states. Why do they steal more in Democratic states? Some just don't know how to manage, they simply can't, and they end up spending a lot of money on things that could have cost much less. Yes, or they just steal more themselves, or they have more people who steal. Honestly, I can't imagine any other option. And as for Republican officials stealing, well, excuse me, but I just can't imagine that they don't steal. That's why I think they're just more shy than the Democrats.
Editor, with this big, wonderful bill, we have great momentum that we're carrying into 2026. That's amazing, but it's still extremely important to point out which policies work and which ones don't. The inflation numbers we've talked about show that the blue states' policies aren't working as well as the red states' policies.
He thinks it's the law and regulations in the Dem states, but I think it's all these rules and projects. They're actually designed to steal in California from the homeless, in New York from the illegals, in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Yeah, that means in kitchens for poor children. And suddenly, out of nowhere, they found hundreds of thousands of autistic people. Hundreds of thousands of autistic people they suddenly found. And all of them need to be treated, fed, put to sleep, bathed, and so on. And all of them are in Minnesota, where Somali refugees took up this work. They used to be pirates. Is the effect of illegal immigrants on prices Trump's achievement? You could add that under Biden, jobs were filled by cheap migrants, and American citizens not getting those jobs automatically ended up on unemployment benefits. Accordingly, instead of contributing to the system, they were taking from it. In Trump's economy, things are actually different.
What would you say to economists claiming that most people's expenses aren't rising and the economy's growth is mainly due to the top 10%? And what about those people with low wages or who are barely making ends meet? What would you say to that?
Well, first of all, people have lost about $3,000 in purchasing power under Joe Biden because of inflation. And now real wages have increased by about $1,300 since the beginning of the year. So we're making a lot of progress. But the point is, and ultimately what matters to people is what's in their wallet. What's happening with growth. And if you look at what's happening with growth, it's very, very positive, and income growth as well.
But why is that? Whatever it is, why does it work? Trump signs some executive orders, talks about the business climate, travels around the world, and attracts investments. For us, that's for you and me.
So I think it really works in 3 different stages. Here, first of all, we have a big, beautiful bill, and it's already having some impact. But next year, many of the laws it creates will essentially really come into effect. Okay, but what is it filled with? The hallmark of Trump's legislation is largely what can be called classic conservative economics. Right? Tax cuts, deregulation, a sort of supply-side philosophy, and so on and so forth. But obviously, it doesn't stop there. Isn't that right? There are also Trump's tariffs, arguably the most controversial part of his economic plan. As you can see, they don't strongly affect inflation, but help our gross domestic product by lowering the trade deficit. But there are tariffs. And finally, of course, I'll note that the issue of emigration is closely tied to the economic approach, because essentially, as a country, we reject the philosophy that, quote, our economy needs mass emigration, right? Who will do this work? They help gross domestic product grow. No, we'll do it ourselves. We will build a country that truly serves our people.
So 3 pillars, legs, and support points. The state gives businesses freedom and does not punish them for success. Well, in many countries, if you served your customers well and they paid you a lot of money for it, the authorities fine you for that. For what? For doing your job too well. Well, that's in the United States and in Canada and in Europe and in Japan and in Australia and in Israel, everywhere, 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 everywhere. We're trying to introduce it here now in the United States. Laissez-faire capitalism, but what the French finance minister Colbert once proposed to Louis XIV as a quick way to restore the economy actually means that's what laissez-faire means. Get off my back, leave me alone, don't interfere, etc. Secondly, both in France and in all other cases when people tried this, when, as they say, they are given freedom and told, we'll take 10, 20, I don't know, it doesn't matter how much, and that's it, period. Do whatever you want, sell to whoever you want, do it, and just pay us. The economy takes off. Here are the second customs duties, because of which it becomes more profitable to produce in the United States than to export goods made in Mexico, to import goods, I mean, from Mexico, Canada, or China. In addition, tariffs make it possible, by collecting them, to pay back the national debt. And third, the departure of 2.5 million migrants made it possible to bring millions of Americans back to work. Well, it freed up a huge number of apartments, freed up quite a lot of spots in schools, shorter lines at doctors' offices, things like that, but let's say that's just convenience. Yes, but what I told you before, that's a clear financial relief. That is, we brought back to work 1 million, 1.5 million, or even 2 million Americans who used to be supported by our taxpayers, not because they wanted to, but simply because cheaper illegal workers were being hired instead of them.
Why did Donald Trump inherit such a mess, right? Why was Joe Biden's economy so bad? Specifically because, of course, you might remember from those years, they always broke down the economic indicators on paper and said, hey, look, actually the growth is great, take a look. But in reality, everyone says, okay, but inflation is so bad, why don't we feel the so-called prosperity you're talking about? Well, that's, of course, because by and large, Biden's economic growth was essentially fake, right? It wasn't an organic phenomenon. The government printed and injected a lot of money into the economy at once, creating the illusion of rapid growth instead of real private sector or innovation-driven growth. But in reality, that's why you saw such rapid inflation, which wage growth in America couldn't keep up with, right? Because in the end, the prosperity was basically fake. In many ways, it was a trick to try to win the 2024 election, which obviously failed.
Right? They printed papers and, under various pretexts, sent them to hundreds, if not thousands, of Democratic organizations. Well, the front for the criminal gang called the United States Democratic Party. But more and more unearned and practically fake money keeps piling up, leading to a temporary sense of wealth, and then to the rise in prices of everything. Inflation is the best way to rob a country. Every time we hired a new official, we were stealing money from those who actually produced something. Under Biden, businesses didn't expand. Mostly the number of officials increased. The rabbits, they grew and devoured everything they could eat.
We prefer job and economic growth to come from the private sector, not mostly from the public sector. By the way, this trend that you've often seen, obviously because of Dodge, right? Job growth and economic growth are coming not from the government, but from the private sector. This big, beautiful law, the tax cuts, all of it is an incentive for that very private sector to start growing. Yes, you're seeing positive signs, and that's happening too. Also, why Kazakhstan? I'm looking at the gross domestic product numbers, but it's not just about gross domestic product, it's about the fact that American wages are now outpacing inflation. That's true economic growth, not fake, right? Most hiring now happens in the private sector, showing real, not fake, economic growth. By the way, when it comes to native-born citizens, they are the ones getting jobs first now, not foreigners. This is an economy that's truly an American economy, not some globalist foreign one, right? So all of this is very important for us to be able to discuss. And another point I've been trying to make about this, especially from a political perspective, is that often when it comes to the economy, growth and recovery just happen much more slowly in the real world than politicians would like.
Another way to raise the standard of living is productivity. If a worker makes one table in an hour, let's say, then the cost price of that table, very roughly, very schematically, is the cost of the raw materials plus the cost of the worker's time. Well, let's say the cost of materials is $20, and let's say the worker is paid $40 per hour. Then the cost price of this item will be $20 for materials plus $40 for 1 hour of labor, which equals $60. Well, and let's say we add $20 of profit to that. So in total, we need to sell it for $72. But if the worker makes the table in half an hour, then the cost price of this table decreases. The materials are still $20, but now it's not an hour, but half an hour, so $20. So 20 for materials plus 20 for labor. Labor time is $40 plus 20 profit is 48. You can already see how technology, that is productivity, affects the cost of the product, the final good. In the United States, new technologies began to develop rapidly, and the productivity of the American worker is constantly increasing, which means that products are becoming more affordable.
New technologies lead to job reductions, especially in the first years of implementation, but over time they increase productivity.
In the very long term, if the capabilities of AI can no longer expand, the job loss will be about 23%, but labor productivity may increase 3 to 4 times. This is because AI can learn, and then a person will also be able to use AI more efficiently and then train it so that it suits everyone. And when productivity grows, that's actually huge.
And if you can increase productivity by 4 times, then taking our example, you can make 4 tables in an hour, which means 1 table every 15 minutes. So the raw materials are $20 plus $10 a quarter of an hour. That's $30 plus 20% profit equals $36. So the table, when you make it faster and better, now costs not $72, but exactly half of that. But I have great news for you. The materials will also become cheaper. Let's say labor productivity has increased there too. Something else has improved. Gasoline has become cheaper because of this, and so on. So let's say they will now cost 25% less, meaning $15 instead of $20. Materials plus $1, 10 labor is $1.25. With 20% profit, the table costs $30. It will be sold. It can be sold for $30 to be continued. So what's in it for us? What does this mean for us and the American standard of living? First of all, if before, with a salary of, say, $200,000 for a family of 4, let's take that same example, you could afford a house of about 100 square meters. Now you can get one that's 150. Secondly, you can upgrade your cars to newer or more powerful ones. And thirdly, you can finally do the renovations you've been putting off for a long time. You can also take the whole family on a week-long vacation you've promised the kids. Maybe not all at once or together, but that same salary now lets you buy 3 times as many tables from our example as you could before. The table now costs $30 instead of $72. Actually, 2.5, not 3. Yes, or you could buy a table for $30 and also get some chairs with it. And there will still be enough left for ice cream for the kids and flowers for your wife, or the other way around, who has a good life in America. And as a final touch,
Economists
show this.
J-curve. When new technologies are introduced, efficiency and job creation often decline initially, but data later shows gains in productivity and employment. And I think the Federal Reserve sees, at least initially, that AI probably won't create a lot of jobs right away, just like most technological innovations, where you don't see a big increase in jobs immediately. When people start to implement and see where this productivity has led to greater profitability, then it leads to more job growth.
In conclusion, we are now at the bottom of this curve. We are at the lowest point of the economic boom. We are at the starting line, but the market can already feel the energy. Did you know that the measure of a market's health is the buyer's confidence in tomorrow? It is measured during holidays by how many gifts people buy and how much money they spend. How does this compare to previous years? We're interested in comparing it to the past. So this year there were 8% more purchases online than last year, and 4% more in stores. And that's a lot. Just so people wouldn't answer surveys and talk about it, they calmed down and opened their wallets. Of course, they're being egged on by the media and the Democratic Party, but give it another 2 to 3 months and they won't be paying attention to that either.
Only construction work. You can't invest $3 trillion a year without skyrocketing our gross domestic product. You'll see 4, you'll see 5, and you'll see 6% gross domestic product growth. With this president, factories are returning home as tariffs encourage them to come back. You've never seen construction like you'll see, and then when those factories start operating, you'll see numbers that no one ever thought possible.
Secretary isn't the last word. Take today as an example. Today's jobs report turned out to be basically twice as good as Wall Street predicted. Twice as good as Wall Street predicted. How would you comment on that?
Well, I think, this is just preparation for where we're heading. You understand, a big, beautiful bill is coming into effect. We'll ensure affordability for everyone with a strong focus on lowering costs. You will see that inflation will start to go down. You keep energy prices low. Next year, tax data will come in, and I believe that rates should be cut by at least 100 basis points. This will increase housing affordability, and it will help America fully realize itself, realize its potential.
What is your opinion on the distribution of tariff dividends next year? This didn't generate much enthusiasm on Capitol Hill. The president keeps talking about it, and what does Howard Lutnick think?
Well, look, the president wants Americans to understand that this has benefited them, right? Is that it? Yes, it will reduce our deficit. Yes, it will make the country stronger.
That was a wonderful conclusion delivered by Covert Latnick, President Trump's closest economic advisor. The essence of his speech. Unlike the rest of the world, the United States economy is experiencing unprecedented growth. To be continued, that's all for now. Goodbye and see you next time.